Sir.
Beautiful area, isn't
All right,
it, on the
you're
lake
live.
there?
Okay, we're doing it. Hi, everybody.
Hello.
So
Joining.
Do a
Chuck's
sound.
on now.
Do a little sound check for each person, maybe a little roll call or something.
Is not on the call yet. We do have Chuck. Chuck is connecting right now.
okay, so we'll wait a moment here for Chuck to get connected, and then we'll
Where's Jordan?
He's
have everybody do a sound check.
Hi, we're here.
There he is.
Who is that?
Yeah.
There's Chuck and
Can you
Lou.
hear me?
Hey, Chuck.
Hello, Kate.
Hi, guys. I can hear you, Chuck.
Sounds good.
Uchi, can you hear okay?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Hi, guys.
Mike, turn on their video.
Jordan, I don't think it has video. Jordan, can you hear okay?
I can hear you guys great. Can you hear me okay?
You bet.
And then Mike, do you have video or no?
No, I don't.
Okay.
There we go.
Perfect.
Okay.
And then Barb?
I'm here.
Okay, we can hear you. So at this time, I'll go ahead and start the work session for the Planning Commission, the May 6, 2020 meeting. And what this meeting is for is the introduction to the city's new contract planners and discussion of projects and work plan, i.e. comp plan update, 3 mile plan update, lighting regulations. And then also there was, where we're going to talk about the Argo briefly and the buildings behind Marion's. That's kind of what our agenda is. Everybody agree on that?
Sounds fine to me.
Okay. Well, at this time, I would like to introduce Barbara Cole and have her introduce, speak about herself and her company and kind of your insight and where you'd like to see us going here.
Okay, well, good to be back with you guys. The first time I worked in Idaho Springs was 37 years ago. With Nori Winter, Nori and I both did your downtown redevelopment plan in 1983. I have to turn this off. And then I went to, so I went from doing that in Idaho Springs. I then became the first town planner and urban renewal authority director in Estes Park, and was responsible for the revitalization of downtown Estes Park. From there, I went to the Department of Local Affairs and as the Main Street coordinator and then head of a program called Colorado Initiatives. I spent a lot of time in Idaho Springs. One, we helped take the old school building and move it to its present location, which is now City Hall. And then also, and I've got to go back through my files and figure out who we used to help do this, help move the train from the middle of the street to its present location. And we used, I found some guys that just were like real big train enthusiasts. And so they thought it was the coolest thing in the world to be able to move that train and to somehow figure out putting down temporary tracks or whatever. And then the last time I worked in Idaho Springs was we were hired by the state to do the scenic byway for Mount Evans. And so we worked closely with people in Idaho Springs, and that's where we made sure that the start of the byway was at the Heritage Center. So we were sure that people would drive all the way through town and spend money. So since that time, I have personally worked for many small communities, and that's sort of our expertise. 2 years ago, maybe 3, my company, which you can see online, is Community Matters Inc., which was a regular corporation. We decided to become a not-for-profit. So we're continuing to do work here in the States as well as overseas. So it's been fun to get back into Idaho Springs, and people like Chip. I think when I first met him, I don't even know if his twins were born. So it's been quite some time. I first met Mike Davenport, who now works for us, when he was the assistant town administrator manager in Monument and also the town planner. So Mike and I have worked together on and off since 2000, and then he joined us, both the firm and the institute, when he left Telluride, where he was a historic preservation planner architect for the town of Telluride. So I know the community well. The other good news is that your city attorney, I have worked with previously in the town of Platteville, where we served as contract planner in the town of Morrison down the road, town of Granby, town of Larkspur. And typically whenever a small town gets a big development that's pretty complex and has lots of moving pieces, I usually get called. And I typically can't say no. So do you have any question? Mike, do you want to say a few words?
No, well, it just briefly to add what Barbara said in terms of my experience. I've worked in several different mountain communities. Besides Telluride, I also was the planning director for Teller County, which, and we were based in Woodland Park, but Teller County is the county on the backside or west side of Pikes Peak. And Barb and I both, in 2018, we filled in as the half and half. We filled in as the planning director for the city of Manitou Springs. They had a long search for a new director, so we were there for about 10 months.
And they only said they needed us for 3 months.
I'm afraid we might have to keep you to hear this that long anyway.
So do you have any questions of us?
Does any of the commissioners have any questions?
I don't, except welcome.
Well, it's good to
Yeah,
be
I was gonna
back.
say welcome back.
Okay. At this time, would you like to discuss any of the items that we had on our agenda?
I think one of the things before we were hired, Bill had called me and just wanted to understand who we were, what we could do. And one of the things that he requested and he thought would be helpful is that if every month we supplied the commissioners with sort of a running list of the projects that were either on deck or soon to be on deck. So I thought that might be really useful for all of you to sort of understand what we've been up to in this sleepy little town called Idaho Springs. So that's in your packet. And one of the things that we're doing, and I think the good news is because Mike and I sort of split the planning director job in Manitou Springs, Mike and I really figured out who was best at what. And so we're just picking up from where we left off. I will tell you that the City Council of Manitou Springs, the Planning Commission, and our staff of 4 would joke that Mike and I are sort of like yin and yang. So we have very different personalities, but it all seems to work out. So let me.
Ms. Cole, could you speak a little bit louder?
Yeah, just a second. I got another call. Just a second. I can't talk now. I'm going to call. Okay. Sorry about that. So let's start with the list that came in your packet and we updated this. So the first is Polar Gas, which is basically at I-70 in the Central City Parkway, otherwise known as the Hidden Valley subdivision, minor subdivision. So that should have been a really easy project to start with. And when I picked it up and started going through the files, I looked at the code and lo and behold, we discovered that above ground storage of propane tanks, any kind of fuel was not allowed by the city code. So we weren't quite sure how it got approved in 2010. And so Andy and I put in a call to the city attorney, said, how do we deal with this? Because this is a non-conforming use. It shouldn't expand. And Carmen basically said, well, we don't want to get sued. So let's do this. We'll let them build the second tank, but we need to clearly record that this is what's called a non-conforming use of record. So we just got the final development plan today. Because it's less than a 50% increase, the final development plan is handled administratively. But we also ran it by John in Public Works and then Fred Banfield, the city attorney, because we had some floodplain issues. So that was submitted today, and they are well on their way. The next one is Tommy Knocker.
Excuse me real quick, if you would,
Yep.
please. So Polar Gas is not the only propane company we have in the city. We also got Feral Gas. And is this gonna address that with them also in the future?
It would if they come in again. I'm not quite sure how that was missed in the code, but it's section, if I remember, the 29 dash.
That's okay.
Yeah. So yes, if somebody came in that has an existing above ground storage of any kind of fuel, it's expressly prohibited in your code unless it's within an enclosed structure. I think that's how the code reads. So if they came in to expand, and if the city attorney is consistent, I mean, we could do one of two things: just let everybody know now that they shouldn't have been approved, or wait for them to come in.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Tommy Knocker Brewery, Mike handled that. That was pretty simple. They were sort of redoing their seating inside, and so that was easy. But again, the planner needs to review it before you get a building permit through Wonder. Mike, do you want to just talk then about Tommy Knocker and the certificate of appropriateness?
Yes, Tommy Knocker has submitted an application to replace the existing CO tank that is on the west side of the building. It's behind like a 6-foot privacy fence now. They have to apply for a building permit, and when something like this is done in the historic district, it has to also go to the HPRC to make sure that it does fit in with the design guidelines that the city has adopted.
Even for inside?
Outside.
Oh, the tank.
Yeah, just.
Sorry.
Okay,
The next one on the list is Soda Creek Highlands residential rezoning, which obviously you guys turned down on a couple, how many weeks ago, I'm not sure, but before our time. And they were scheduled to be for a first reading in front of City Council on the 23rd. Obviously, that was put on hold because of COVID-19. And we have not heard from them in terms of how they want to proceed from here. If they wanted, though, Andy and I have discussed, it wouldn't be a great idea to go in front of City Council. They have every right to do that. But again, we have not heard from the applicant. So that's sort of just hanging out there. Scott Penna's setback variance request. Again, that's a small variance having to do with the setback. And that, Mike, that's now scheduled for the 27th, is that correct?
Yes, they just confirmed Diane just confirmed the date, I believe, this morning.
Okay. Then the next one is Mighty Argo and Virginia Canyon Mountain Park, mixed use development. So I have been sort of the lead on that in terms of reviewing the final development plan. This is just phase one of a 3-phase project. Again, this is based on a public-private partnership development agreement that the city and Argo signed. And this phase includes the lower and upper level facilities connected by a cable car or gondola. It will provide increased access to Virginia Canyon Mountain Park. And there's also a related application that Mike is monitoring for an earth disturbance permit to construct an access drive at the upper level, and an application for annexation of 4 parcels that are now under control by Argo. And just to let everybody know, the requirement for a final development plan in Idaho Springs is a little bit different. I need to pull this up. If it's a PD, the code reads as follows: site plan as part of a planned development. Site plans as part of planned developments are only required to be conceptual in regard to use areas, easement locations, transportation improvements, parking, access locations, building areas, and landscaping, as long as there is sufficient detail to determine the proposed development generally conforms to the intent of the planned development at the time of final development plan. So you will be getting a staff report. Again, this is, it's not a lot of development. I mean, it's the gondola, you know, and the development of the upper landing and a parking deck. But one of the things that the final development triggered was certain commitments in the annexation agreements, the development agreements, again, that have been entered into by the city and the Argo team, and also with your planned development zoning. So I will get, in the interest of giving you extra time, I will be getting my draft staff report to Andy on Friday, and then he'll review it over the weekend, and you will get the staff report as well as the submittal on Monday. Andy said at the worst on Tuesday, so you have extra time. So we really can't talk a lot about that because it's an application in process. But again, because we're having to do this all virtually, we're suggesting a couple of things. So I believe that Diane will also be sending you out a link to everything you need to read. The other thing we're going to ask the applicant is to prepare or to provide a full set of the drawings at 24 by 36. We will make those available at City Hall by appointment only. So if you're like me and have a hard time looking at these plans on a screen, there will be a full set of the drawings available. And what Andy and I have discussed is I think what I'm going to do in the interest of transparency and maybe some initial dialogue is provide a short little worksheet for anybody that comes in and wants to review the plans, and also give you guys like a red marker if you actually want to mark up the plan set, so we'll know ahead of the hearing what your questions might be, or what your concerns might be, or what you really like about the project, etc. So that's
One more project to mention, and that's 2800 Minor Street.
we're not there yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay, I'm going off of the staff memo. So then just again, the Argo annexation of 4 parcels on the upper landing. Argo will be submitting an annexation application for 4 mining claims that are close to the upper landing. They will submit that prior to the public hearing on the 20th, according to Travis Cook, their design lead. And we will also be getting a letter from the county allowing the gondola cable to pass over county land during the time that property is being annexed. The next thing is a subdivision plat for the Argo development. So again, the recorded annexation agreement requires that the applicant plat the property. The Argo attorney and the city attorney have sent us sort of a memo saying this is how this should happen. But again, I think staff's main concern is just the proper recordation of a lot of the easements. So there are access easements to the park. We need some sort of easement or license, revocable license, because part of the gondola will be hanging over Riverside Drive. And so that is also on its way. Next, Mike, why don't you talk about 2800 Minor Street?
2800 Minor Street is the location is the mobile home park that is to the east of the Safeway. And the developer has submitted an application to do several apartment buildings on that property. It was a project that was moving towards a hearing before the virus changed everyone's schedules and hearings were temporarily put off. But that is an item that is a project that will be coming to Planning Commission and City Council. And it's likely to have some kind of plat application that will happen as well. It involves several different pieces of property, and it will probably be necessary to combine those properties into a single property.
Yeah, and I think just, Mike, you and I haven't discussed this, but I agree with Carmen. I think Carmen's recommendation is they do a minor subdivision plat. So again, I don't think the Planning Commission has seen a lot of subdivision plats, but for some reason, all of a sudden, we have all these projects that require some sort of platting.
That'll also require rezoning, correct?
Well, again,
Yes, the 2800 Minor Street project, the applicant has also requested a rezoning of the property. You're right.
so he did decide to go with the rezoning, Mike?
I believe he's staying with the he's making modifications, but staying with the basic concept that he submitted originally.
Yeah, just as a bit of background, when Alan was here, there was some talk about keeping it R2 and moving ahead just with some sort of townhome project. But, and again, city staff really can't say anything one way or another, except that not rezoning it would be easier than going through the rezoning process. And that's also a fallback option should the rezoning not be approved. Mike, you want to take the next one?
I don't have the agenda in front of me.
Okay, so that's the detached garage.
Well, that has to do with, we get several inquiries a week that are zoning questions. And we've got several questions regarding a proposed detached garage behind a single family home. That's just one of, like I said, several types of questions we get a week where they're asking whether it's about a fence or about a setback or whatever. Part of my responsibility is I monitor the planning department email all day long during the week to be able to answer questions like this that come up.
Yep. The next one is the we're calling it the Betts Cabin annexation rezoning, minor subdivision and final development plan. That is Rachel Betts that owns the wedding business. And she would like to annex the property by the water treatment plant that is in the county. She has about 10 cabins up there that are all on individual septic. And she would like to eventually connect that to the sewer system. She has submitted the land use application, so we know what she's doing, and will be paying the fees and deposits soon. It's my understanding that Rachel's in the process of resurveying the property. So that's that one. And I think, you know, maybe you'll see that midsummer. The next one that we're not quite sure what they're going to propose, but this is 1800 Colorado Boulevard. And it also backs up to Riverside Drive on the backside. So that property recently sold and it's currently being surveyed. It's currently a commercial property, but Mike had a call or an email. So it goes to just the planner, you know, at idahosprings.co.com. We're not quite sure what they're planning, but there was an inquiry about affordable housing. Is that correctly stated, Mike?
Yes, that's right.
Yep. The community.
Well, more specifically, the question was about, were there any type of tax incentives programs that were available? And I provided him some information both regarding the county and the state.
Okay, and a quick question I got, exactly what is the location, 1800
Yeah, that's what
Colorado?
Gold Rush Center.
Gold Rush Center. Okay, thank you.
Yep. The community clinic, Alan had signed off on. Again, this is a project because it's a public project. There's only so much review we can do, but Alan had done that review and signed off on the building permit for this project. I also discovered that Fred Banfield had some engineering questions, and those had been forwarded to Dan as the building inspector, just to ensure that hopefully they get addressed. They were not big things, but a lot of it had to do with ADA parking, et cetera.
Correct. And we had addressed a lot of that at the meeting. We as a commission approved this. And then we went after, we did like a one-way in and out of the property. If I remember right, the ADA stuff was addressed on that building design. So you might want to dig into what was presented to the commission back when we did all this. And I think a lot of that we already had handled with Alan and approved as a commission.
Right. So it's not coming back in front of you. I think Fred was just concerned that maybe in the transition, his comments had not been addressed. And so we just let Dan, as the building inspector, know that.
Sure.
And then again, as Mike noted,
lost it.
that. So is this kind of information really helpful for the planning commission?
Oh, yes, I think this is very helpful. It keeps us informed, but I don't want to badmouth Alan like I told you when we talked, and I will not, but he didn't share everything with us that I felt like he should have been along doing. And before we had Alan, we didn't have a real city planner. So we had to do a lot of things on our own. But when we got him on board, it's just like we wouldn't know what was happening until we got to the meeting, basically. And I think this is very, very helpful for us. It keeps us informed on all of our projects, and I think it'll help us move forward on everything a whole lot better.
Any questions on any of these?
I don't have any. Cindy?
No,
By the way, so just so everybody knows, Cindy's here, by the way, and
oh, is that who's sitting down there at the other end?
I'm in your
Yeah.
spot.
she's sitting in your spot, Chuck.
We're socially distanced.
Yeah,
And
there's
Andy,
candy in the drawer.
One other project you might want to,
Can I ask something?
is the Habitat project. The Habitat for Humanity
Oh.
project, behind
behind the
Elks Club.
Rocks Club.
Okay, so what Andy's asking is we addressed the Habitat for Humanity project behind the Elks Lodge. That never came in front of us, and I thought it should have all along. And I don't know what its status is
It's
now.
still sketch, it
I
has,
can tell you about it if you want to. I'm working with the architect.
it still will be coming to you.
Okay, so Andy just said it'll still be coming to us, which is fine. And I guess instead of confusing the issue and dragging this on, we'll just wait till that's submitted to us, and then we'll go from there. That sounds good to everyone.
Sounds fine.
And again, if any of you, we have to be very careful about ex parte communication when there are applications in process.
Sure.
But if there's ever any information or we're sort of trying to get things a little bit better. I mean, when we first talked to Alan and then Mike sat down with him before he left, in many ways, Alan was very organized. But I think that what we're trying to do is also make things a little bit more transparent. So if any of you have any what I call need to know information or something that you'd like to know, please feel free to reach out to us and just say, hey, Barb, hey, Mike, we'd really like to know X, Y, and Z.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Barb or Mike that you'd like to ask at this time? I think they've done a great presentation for us.
No, they're good with me.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Lucci, you have anything? Okay. Well, yeah, that was great. I love it. Well, if no one has any other questions, I think we're at a point where we need to get these things put in front of us, like Barb was just explaining, and set our next meeting when, I guess, Barb, when you would think we need to have our next meeting, we will. It's usually the first Wednesday of the month is when we regularly meet.
I think there's one scheduled, isn't
So
there?
you're going to be meeting on the 20th.
Oh, I hadn't heard, nobody informed the chairman about this.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
So obviously Argo was scheduled for the 1st. There was at that point in time, Andy, the city attorney, and the mayor felt very uncomfortable moving forward on any large project without face-to-face contact. And the term that was always used is we need to look at a reasonable time period. Well, once we started looking, and this is really thanks to Andy, of all of the projects that required a quasi-judicial hearing, i.e. public hearing, the list was getting pretty long. So the schedule for Argo is that you'll be hearing the final development plan on May 20th, and it will then quickly, some of us are not going to have a Memorial Day weekend, go to City Council on the 26th.
Okay, thank you.
So that'll be on that. And
Are all,
then,
excuse me, real quick, are all the other commissioners okay with the 20th?
I am.
Yeah, I think so. Sounds good to me.
It's not like you-
I don't think I can, Bill. I think I'm getting sworn in on the rec board that night.
Okay. It sounds like we got enough people to have a quorum was my direction on asking that question.
And I'm fine with you guys being there without me. That's no problem.
Okay, thank you.
and then the annexation, though it will be submitted prior to the 20th, the scheduling of hearings on annexation is messy. I mean, it's just a lot of notice. And so I was hoping that could go on the 8th of June. That does not go. Now, have you guys typically just been informed of the annexations, or does it just skip over you totally?
So we're normally informed on it, and we sometimes review the property. This one here we're familiar with, so I don't think we need to do that. But yeah, we just have a public hearing on it and do the annexation here at Planning Commission meeting.
Okay.
And then in conjunction with the annexation, usually there'll be a rezoning which would go through Planning Commission.
Correct.
Yeah, let me just do a quick update on that. One of the things that we're thinking about for the zoning is that these 4 parcels you will see on the final development plan. And the thought is that those parcels will just be included in the existing plan development. And we're suggesting, and Andy and I have talked about this, that be administratively approved. In order for that to happen, I have suggested, and once you guys start doing more of these plan developments, you'll understand why, that I will write an amendment to the municipal code for review by Andy and Carmen that will basically allow, and I've got to come up with the wording. So something that really has nothing to do with public benefit, doesn't have anything to do with health, safety, welfare, etc. You've already seen it, to allow staff to approve the update to their existing plan development zone administratively. Is that something you guys are comfortable with?
That's fine. It's just adding to what they already have.
I don't know. Do we want to make this a standard procedure though?
No.
Well, what I'll do, and you'll see it, okay, is that a number of the plan developments I've worked on in smaller communities, Granby, Salida, Larkspur. What typically happens when you do large plan developments that are multi-phase is sometimes there are little things that the developer did not anticipate. So the idea would be to spell out very clearly, these are the only things that can be done administratively. What I may do is provide an option that if you're not comfortable with that, but again, you're going to have to hear it anyway, that these things can be approved by Planning Commission and then doesn't have to go to City Council. But the idea again is, you know, these 4 mining claims on the top, you'll see them when you review the final development plan. In some sense, you're already reviewing them. So a lot of the smaller municipalities basically have some sort of 10% rule. So let's say I was Argo and, you know, they're required to dedicate open space. So let's say it, you know, they decided that maybe they wanted to dedicate more open space. Is that something you really need to review? Because obviously it's of great benefit to the city. But as I said to Andy, I think it's really important that that code change needs to be reviewed by planning commission, probably city council.
Anybody else's thoughts? Okay. Okay, well, Barb, if you and Andy have discussed this and you're comfortable with it, let's if you can put that together and we can review it and we can go from there.
Perfect. Okay. So the three other things on the agenda are the comp plan update, 3 mile plan update, and lighting regulations. So why do you guys want to update your comp plan?
How long's it been?
2017.
So we're only required to do that every, what, 10 years, 5 years? So I think we're still 2 years away from that.
There was some minor updates related to apps and what was
See, the plans that was adopted November 13, 2017.
But Jonathan just said there's a couple of items we need to address on a couple of the maps. So if you could, I would recommend if you could put that together for the 20th or the 8th. It sounds like it might be pretty simple, probably more like June 8th would be
Okay.
better.
Okay.
I have a question. Would it be possible to look into including in the comp plan some kind of inclusive, is it called inclusive zoning, where so we can have more power to request people to build affordable housing, actually affordable housing?
Oh, it's so interesting that you're raising that issue. So Mike, do you want to just give an update on sort of what you found in the fee schedule? And
Yes, the city adopts a fee schedule every year, and it turns out it lists, it actually does list there being a housing fee. However, as best as we can tell, there hasn't been any actual adoption of the fee, even though it's listed with the other fees. My understanding is, our understanding is that there has been some discussion at city council about it, and the land development regulations make several references to this is something city council could do. So we're looking into this further right now as to what the situation is. What are the other aspects of when you adopt, for example, a housing impact fee, and quite a few mountain communities have done that, usually there is some kind of study where it's determined what's an appropriate number, where sort of an expert in that area does an analysis and determines for every new housing unit that's built, how much impact it has, particularly on the need then for, say, workforce or affordable housing. And as best as we can tell, that type of study we don't think has been done yet, but we're still looking.
We do have that.
We do have that.
Yeah.
But back to your original question, is that there are, for example, you could look at a possible amendment to the land development regulations regarding inclusionary zoning. There are communities that have adopted those types of regulations.
but I think the suggestion is to put stronger language in a comp plan amendment as a first step. And if there has been a study, Jonathan, if you have that on housing, it would be really important that we see that like ASAP.
Yeah, we have it. It's a housing needs assessment that was done by the county, and it's all illustrated in there. I can send it to you. The other thing is, one of the concerns about an impact fee in Idaho Springs is we have very little developable area. And so the significance of that fund would be relatively minor. And so we've been looking at some other ways to build inclusionary zoning aside from that impact fee, because there's only one or two development.
Yeah, and I don't know, I know years ago, we did the fiscal impact analysis for Mount Crested Butte that obviously as a ski town it has a huge issue with what I call attainable housing and only 9 miles of road. And the problem with using an impact fee is, one, there needs to be what's called an essential nexus or rational nexus to imposing the fee, but you cannot impose an impact fee for a level of service that's greater than you're already providing. So like in Mount Crested Butte, we could not use impact fees as the method to get to attainable housing, but we can very easily provide you, maybe as a start in the comp plan update, here are some of the ways in which to get to attainable housing that you could think of. I mean, when we were in Manitou Springs, we had, what was it called? HAB, the Housing Advisory Board. And again, Manitou Springs has a huge issue, very little developable land, and an amazing need for any kind of housing that was reasonably priced. So, I mean, there are ways you can look at land trusts. I think we still have a list of all of the programs available at the state level. So maybe the first step, and Jonathan, I know this is an interest area of yours. Maybe what we can do is just sort of put together a toolbox that basically says, here are some different ways to get to, I like to call it attainable housing rather than affordable, because in some communities, affordable doesn't even exist. So is it attainable? That, and workforce is another term. So maybe that's something that we can put together as part of the comp plan update, if that's an area you want to look at. And then you guys can sort of have a work session as to what you think fits best with Idaho Springs.
And the existing, the 2017 plan actually does use all three terms: attainable, workforce, and affordable, but there's about 3 pages. It's more general in nature and some references to further information. So further work could certainly be done on that section of the plan.
Yeah. The next thing that's on the list that we got from Andy is a 3-mile plan update. And so is everybody familiar with what a 3-mile plan is and why you have it?
Yes, we've done it several times.
Okay, okay. So I think the question is, if you are considering potentially annexing any area beyond the current 3-mile area that's defined, I would include that in the comp plan update. I would also be mindful of the fact, if you're going to include it in your comp plan, you also need to recognize that you're saying that that land can be serviced with centralized services: water, sewer, storm drain, fire, police.
Okay.
Lastly, you've got lighting regulations. Again, worthy of a discussion at a planning commission work session. We actually, when we did the code work for Greenwood Village, they reminded us that they were a village and therefore their planning commission and their council decided that even if you had a tennis court in your backyard, and again, that's a pretty wealthy community, you could not light your tennis court at night because they were a village. So again, lighting is typically, there are many, and I've worked on many what are called dark sky ordinances that basically talk about the need for what are called full cutoff fixtures. And some people think, well, if it's and there's I forget what the term, IES, what is that? Illuminating Engineers Society. But if you have a full cutoff fixture, it doesn't mean that all the light will automatically be downcast. It'll mean that 90%, you can get 90% to go down. Many of the mountain communities we've worked in are very interested in these dark sky ordinances, because if you live up on a hill and you're having to look down, sometimes it's not a pretty sight. So again, and the other thing I would say about lighting regulation is you really need to differentiate between lighting that's necessary for a business or residence versus the lighting that you need for public health, safety, welfare, which is usually why we like to have the police department sort of chime in on any kind of lighting regulation, because there are certain types of light that you do need for security purposes. And again, a discussion item in what we're really all about, and I guess my career is all about outlining the choices and the consequences of the choices so that you guys can make informed decisions.
Oh, sure. Now, this is something I brought up with Alan a while back. My sister lives in Ridgeway, and they've got the lighting regulations there. And when I go visit her, I think it's very nice in Ridgeway, the way the lights are at night and stuff. And that's what started all this with that. I kind of said something to Alan about it, and it never really got going. But like I say, when I go visit my sister in Ridgeway, I really like the way the lighting is there. So I don't know what ordinance they've got written there. It might be something to research. And if you do that out of Ridgeway, she lives in what they call Solar Ranch.
Okay.
So, I mean, this might be something to see what they've got. So at this point, we have nothing to work on. But it's
Well,
just,
I've actually
might be a place to start.
requested, I have actually requested some lighting standards in the Argo development.
That's something.
And lighting, the other thing about lighting, and Mike might know since he was over in Telluride for 9 years, and I know Ridgeway. The other thing about lighting that is really important is the type of light fixture. So when we were working in Granby and Kroger decided to put in a city market, so they were going to have a huge parking lot that everybody could look down on, and the type of light, that the actual color of the light was such that the entire parking lot would look like pea. Yellow pea. And we had to go all the way up to Kroger, Cincinnati, had to pass an emergency ordinance and Kroger said they wouldn't put anything in unless it was an ordinance. So we passed an emergency ordinance that said you have to have a certain type of light so that people looking down on that parking lot, that it would be less of an impact.
In Telluride, they had specific standards where the actual any exterior or wall-mounted light fixture had to be approved on all projects. In addition to that, there were limitations on how much glass area you could have in a wall, and there were also limits on how many skylights were allowed, all for the purposes of trying to be able to see the stars at night, which was still possible in Telluride except on Main Street.
Okay, so does everybody agree? I mean, this is not our priority mission right now. It's just up for discussion, and we'd like to see what could possibly happen in the future. So these other projects are a lot more pressing than this, but let's just keep this one on the agenda if we could, and whatever research gets done, and we can kind of act on it then. Does that make sense? Cindy's shaking her head, yes.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Well, I think we need
Kate?
to be looking at what we can do in-house until we come to.
Sure.
I mean, these guys, we might only have these guys for 3 months. We might have them for 10 months. So I think prioritizing what we have right now with some of these projects is probably the main focus.
Yeah, so this one's pretty low on the importance list. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Or is there any questions from anybody? I sure appreciate everybody's input. I
Sorry,
think.
Bill,
Yes, go ahead.
I missed the last part. You said what is on the not too important list? The lighting?
Yeah, the lighting's kind of low on the list for now. So let's say until we get a permanent planner hired on, maybe that's where that ought to be addressed, because we have all
What
these
about
other
all
issues.
the developments that we have coming though? Is there something we can address without having that developed?
That's a good point. That's a very, very good point.
But Bill, I think we've done this in the past where we've addressed the lighting project by project. You know, I mean, like the Soda Creek lighting, we addressed that right away, that we wanted down, I don't know what it's called, but when they
Downcast.
placed it, yeah, downcasting light. And I think we even talked about it with the River Bend property, that we wanted, lighting that wasn't going to be too over the top or like going to be ruining the night sky. Was it Vista? I'm not sure what the word is. But I think we are doing it at least by project right now. So that's what I wanted
We
to
did
say.
that on the health center also.
Right.
And,
So I
and we're
think
doing it on the Argo also.
Yeah. So I mean, I
That
do
was
think a
that
plan
was
is
a
a good idea.
commitment they made in their plan development, so.
And I do think a plan is good, but I think we are addressing it piece by piece.
So what would the planners suggest? I mean, would it be more time effective to just have an ordinance with about the lighting so we don't have to do this every single time? And how much, how much can we actually ask for if we don't have an ordinance about it?
That's a good point.
Well, and also, Barb, you had said that you like to present options and then we can decide. How long do you think that would take? I mean, would that be something easy to put together, or is that a long-term project?
No, the lighting, I mean, we're just finishing up, or we hope we're finishing up a total overhaul of the town of Milliken's land use regulations. And so one of the issues that we covered with them is lighting. And so there are a couple different ways to do it. There are a lot of what are called dark sky ordinances that are available. My sense is lighting ordinances are probably some of the easiest things you can do.
And there's a value to actually having it written in the regulations rather than having to work it out with every project. And that also creates greater predictability for the applicant. They know what the rules are coming in.
Yeah, I think that's important. And if you guys don't mind, I would like to, we could pass a basic one that we can maybe revise later on when we have more time.
Yeah, they're really not that complicated. I mean, the other thing that's changed in the lighting industry is that, 10, 20 years ago, whatever. So lighting is measured using what are called foot candles. And so in the old days, if you asked a developer to put together a lighting plan to show light spillage outside of your property line, it was a big deal, okay? And it was expensive to get an engineer to put together what's called the photometric plan. What's changed in the lighting industry, let's say I was doing the 69 units at the mobile home park, and we said, we want to ensure that light spillage, and I think this is what Argo committed to, is, not more than 0.06 outside of the property line. Well, you can go to whoever is speccing the lights on your building, and they will automatically, at no cost, provide that photometric plan. So, I mean, it'd probably take me less than a day, because I've done this before, to sort of outline what your options are. Bing, 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 bing.
See, Don?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay,
I just,
yeah, we're, Cindy and I are just talking here, and Uchi, yeah, we're hearing what you're saying, Jordan, but we think that's fine if that's what it'd take you to give us kind of an outline to present to us and let us review that then. You're in agreement, Sandy?
Yes.
Andy said yes also. So let's go ahead and proceed on that then. Thank you, Uchi.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else that needs to be discussed here? I think it was a very, very informative meeting. I thought it went very well. Thank you very much, Barbara and Mike, for introducing yourselves and then to the commission. And thanks for everyone on the commission being at this meeting tonight. It sounds like we got quite a bit of work coming in front of us on the 20th and June 8th to start with for the next two meetings. And if there's nothing else, I'll go ahead and close this work session.
June 8th is what? Because that's a Monday. That's a
Thanks,
council
everybody.
meeting, right?
Night.
Good night.
Night.
Oh,
Good night.